Okay, so here is factoring with grouping, and if you don't use one of these and you just use FOIL, this is probably the method that will make the most sense to you. The first thing you need to recognize is factoring is the opposite of distributing. So here, if we're using FOIL, we have x times 3x squared, there's our 3x squared. And our inside, outside, you guys do outside first, 2 times x, the 2x and the negative 15x go together to make this part, and then negative 5 times 2 is negative 10. So I'm going to call this during this video this inside-outside terms. It'll make more sense when we get farther, but basically we're going to be moving from this form back to binomials, and we've got to be paying attention to those inside-outsides, and a diamond problem is going to help us. Some of the things we need to understand about a quadratic, and this is the standard form of a quadratic, is that a is the coefficient in front of the x squared, and the a, by the way, is only the number, not the x squared part, just the number. And then the b is the coefficient in front of the x, same, just the number, and then c is the constant that doesn't have a variable. So in the case of 3x squared minus 6x plus 3, a is 3, my bad, and b is negative 6. Pay careful attention to the negatives, and then c is going to be 3. And that's an important piece because we're going to use a diamond problem to help us, and we need to have our understanding of a and c and b to allow us to fill in the diamond problem. First step in factoring, by the way, is if you can divide out a common factor, that's where you want to start. And so if we have a quadratic like 3x squared minus 6x plus 3, we can look at the first term, we can look at each term and look to see if there's a number or numbers and variables that we can divide out. In this case, 3 and negative 6 and 3 have a common factor of 3. So we could divide out that 3, and we look at 3x squared, and if we divide out the 3, the only thing left is an x squared. And if we divide out a 3 from negative 6, we'll get negative 2. And we'll divide out a 3 from 3, we'll get 1. Whoops, there's an x here, my bad, plus 1. So that's the first thing you're going to need to do, no matter what. And when there is no c, this dividing out is all you need to do. You're going to look for the biggest common factor and divide it out. So in this case, a 2, 6 and 4 can be divided by 2, and they both have an x. And so when you divide that 2x out, you're going to have a 2x there, because 2x times 2x is 4x squared. You can divide out that negative 6x, and you'll have a negative 3. Now you have the factors of that quadratic. You don't have to, there isn't a binomial factor. Well, you can. Yeah. We're going to go ahead and factor 7x squared minus 27x minus 4. We're going to look at all three of those terms to see if there's a common factor, a number, or variables that all three terms have that can be divided out, and there is not. And then we want to look at a. And we're going to go, okay, how can that possibly happen that we'd end up with 7x squared as our ax squared term? And the only way that can work is if we have a 7x and an x. So we're working backwards, and that's the only way that can work. And then we're going to go ahead and use our diamond problem. You don't have to use a diamond problem, but it's one way of keeping track of the fact that the diamond problem is set up this way. We're going to look at our a, we're going to look at our a and our c. And that a and that c is going to be the product up top, and the b is going to be our bottom part. So we've been practicing diamond problems, and in this case, a times c is a times c is negative 28, 7 times negative 4, and b is negative 27. So we're going to go ahead and look for the factors, the numbers that multiply to negative 28 that add up to negative 27. And the only thing that could possibly work is 28 and 1, and it has to be a negative 28 because we want that to be a negative sum right here. So this is how it works. We have the 7x squared, and then these become our inside-outside numbers, as if we just multiplied them out. So it's negative 28x, pardon me, plus 1x. And then we go back and put our negative 4. So now we're going to go look at the first two terms and we're going to factor them out, and then we're going to look at the last two terms and factor them out. Divide out a common factor. So we're going to go ahead and 7x squared minus 28x, you can divide out a 7x. And if I divided a 7x squared out of that one, I'm going to have an x left. And if I divide a 7x squared, school's out, a 7x squared, a 7x out of that one, I'm going to have an x minus 4. So now I actually know one of my factors, and all we have to do is figure out the other one. We're going to go ahead and, oh, here's x minus 4, the other factor. What can you factor out of 1x and minus 4? Just a 1. And what's left is x minus 4. So here's where you get your factors. This is one of them. I've already got that. And then here's the other one, 7x plus 1. And you have done the opposite of distributing. So look, 7x times x, 7x squared. 1x. There were a bunch of people making noise. Sorry. 7x times x is 7x squared. Outside, negative 28x. 1x minus 4. Sure enough, it is the same thing. So we have just factored that. So as I move through these, if you're beginning to get the hang of it, I would just not listen to me and do it, and then zoom through it to see if you have it correctly. So you don't have to listen through this whole thing. First thing, can you factor out a common factor? The biggest thing you can divide out of all of them is 1, so there's a no there. Looking at the A is an invisible 1. The only way we're going to get a 1x squared is if it's just x times x. So we know what it's going to be starting to look like. And here we are going to set up the diamond problem. A times c is negative 32 times 1. And the b is negative 4. Then using your 12 by 12 table in the back of your book or your multiplication facts, you're going to go ahead and look through the factors of 32. That'll get you 8. Excuse me, that's one of the factors that's in my head, sorry. It'll get you a negative 4. It's going to be 8 times 4. And you have to think about which one of these two, 8 or 4, is going to be negative. And it has to be negative 8 and positive 4 because we want a negative result up top and a negative result down the bottom. So here we go. We've got x squared and negative 8x and positive 4x minus 32. And since we have a 1 in front of the x squared, the biggest thing we can take out right now is an x. We get x minus 8. That's one of our factors. And then here, the biggest thing we can take out is a 4. And we're going to get x minus 8 again, proving that that is one of the factors. And then the other one would be x plus 4. Can you factor out a common factor? Nope. The a has to be a 2x and an x. There's no other way for that to go. We're going to set up our a times c, so negative 3 times 2 is negative 6. And our b is 1. So we're going to have the factors of 3 times 2, but this time the negative one's going to be the smaller one because we want the sum to be positive. So then we're going to go ahead and write our 2x squared plus, here's our plus 3x minus 2x minus 3. And then we're going to go ahead and start doing our division of common factors of the terms here. So we're going to go ahead and look at the front. And the front says that I can take out an x, and I'm going to get 2x plus 3 left. And this one, I can take out a negative 1, and I'm going to get 2x plus 3. So this factor is 2x plus 3, and the other one is x minus 1. Last one, once again, you can stop listening to me, factor it yourself, and then zoom to the part where you can see if you have the correct factors. But you can always check your own factors by multiplying them out again, and then you should get the same thing. So you factor out 4 and negative 15 and negative 4 have no number you can divide out. And we're going to go look at our A. 4x squared could either be 4x times x, or it could be 2x times 2x. Keeping that in mind will help us to get a little done. You don't have to use every bit of every tool, and so once you know kind of the direction you're going, it'll be a little easier. 4 and negative 4 is negative 16 and negative 15. The only factors that will work for that are 16 and 1, and the 16 has to be negative. So we go ahead and write our 4x squared minus 16x plus 1x minus 4. And then we're going to go ahead and pay attention to our first terms and our last term. And when we look at our first term, they both have a 4x they can divide out. And then you'd have an x minus 4. Oh, or there's one of our factors. It can't be 2 and 2. And then the other one is 1, and there's an x minus 4. So here's x minus 4 is one of the factors, and then 4x plus 1 is the other one. There you go. Hello.
How are you?
I am good. Okay. I got my little notebook. Here's my little notebook. Okie dokie, Smokey. How's it going?